Hey guys, Unsightly here, back for another video. Since February is low vision month, I thought today we could talk about albinism, one of the main reasons for my low vision. So I'm going to answer the top 10 questions everyone wants to know about albinism. Question number 1. What is albinism? Well, you're looking at it. I'm not wearing any eye makeup today to kind of show that I don't produce pigment. It doesn't matter whether it's my eyebrows, my eyelashes, my hair. I don't create pigment anywhere in my body. It's surprising how many people seem to think that I'm just Scandinavian when I put on eye makeup or that I dye my hair. You can't get this color in a bottle. First of all, albinism is a hereditary disorder. And what that means is that you have to inherit it from your parents. Albinism is a recessive disorder, so that means you have to get one copy from each one of your parents in order to have albinism. There are two main kinds. The first kind is ocular albinism, which is more common in boys, although not unseen in girls. And the second type, which is oculocutaneous albinism. Ocular albinism typically only affects the eyes, but people can produce varying degrees to normal pigment everywhere else. Oculocutaneous albinism is a lack of pigment systemically, so your eyes, your skin, and your hair don't produce any kind of pigment. Albinism is an extremely rare genetic disorder that occurs in only about 1 in 20,000 people who are born. There are a whole bunch of subcategorizations built in there, type 1A, 1B, 1C. That's too much. But I'm going to tell you that I have oculocutaneous albinism, type 1A, which is the most severe type of albinism where you produce no pigment at all. Some people with oculocutaneous albinism and other forms of albinism can still produce some amount of pigment. Well, they might be blonde, they might have green eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes, and it just depends on the severity or the expression of not being able to produce melanin, or the pigment that creates skin color and hair color. Question number 2, are all albino people blind? The short answer is sort of. The long answer is it depends on the person. Some people with albinism can have almost normal vision. Other people with albinism have really severe visual impairments and are legally blind. It depends on a number of factors and varies person by person. Question number 3. What causes poor eyesight in albinism? That's a rather complex question. That being said, there are a number of things that are specifically related to albinism, and most people with albinism will have one or more of these features. The first one, and probably the most significant reason why people have poor vision, is photophobia. And that doesn't mean that I hate having my photograph taken, although I do. What that means is that I'm exceedingly sensitive to light. Light hurts my eyes. Sitting in front of this ring light is incredibly painful for me to keep my eyes open. Most people with albinism will have some level of photophobia. So most of us will choose to wear sunglasses or have very specific lighting in the places that we work and live. Strabismus is another issue that goes along with albinism. I do have a strabismus. What that means is your eyes aren't necessarily tracking together or pointing in the same direction. I think it's my left eye points in a little bit more towards my nose, although somebody in the comments can correct me if that's wrong. The third issue is depth perception. People with albinism may or may not be able to process visual information from both their eyes simultaneously. I have never been able to do that. So I have never understood what depth perception is, or how it works, or how you're able to kind of tell what's closer or further away. I've had people try to explain it to me, but it still doesn't make sense, so I'm constantly bumping into things, tripping over things. One more visual issue that you can have with albinism is called nystagmus. And a nystagmus is where your eyes shake. It's an incredibly rare occurrence for someone to have a nystagmus. Some people with completely normal vision can have a nystagmus, and it could also mean that you have a brain tumor. It could mean a lot of really serious things, but a lot of people with albinism have a nystagmus because your oculomotor center, which is the part of your brain that kind of controls how your eyes track, isn't working correctly. So that's why, for me, my eyes don't track normally and shake constantly. I can't control it. It's just the way things are. The fifth thing is optic nerve crossover. Now, the thing that carries the information from your eyes and what takes in the information to your brain is your optic nerve. One of the things you may not be aware of is that the optic nerve, which carries visual information from the eyes to the brain, crosses over. So things seen with your right eye are crossed over in part to your left side of your brain, and things seen by your left eye are crossed over in part to your right side of your brain. It doesn't cross over the entire image, but only half of the signal. And that's why you can see in binocular or stereoscopic vision. In people with albinism, typically you will see that the optic nerve doesn't cross over correctly. The nerves kind of get jumbled and they send signals to the wrong place. That's also thought to contribute to some of the reason that people with albinism have a visual deficit. Another reason people have a visual deficit is because of glare or highlighting conditions, and that plays into the photophobia as well. When most people's eyes take in light, they go in through the pupil. And your pupil takes the light straight back to your retina, which takes in the information and sends it back to your brain. In people with albinism, light doesn't just go through the pupil in your eye. It also goes through the iris, which is the colored part around the black center. Because you don't have that production of pigment, which is essentially meant to block out extra light from going into your eye, light goes through both. And it hits the optic nerve, which doesn't have that lovely black coating called rhodopsin or pigment, and it scatters. So the visual information is washed out, blurry, or just non-existent depending on how bright the conditions are. Cataracts are another huge problem for people with albinism. Because you are getting so much more light than the eye is typically used to getting in your average individual, you will develop those kinds of problems with your lens earlier than most people. I have cataracts, and I haven't even hit 30 yet. I've chosen not to correct them because there was significant risk, and it probably wouldn't improve my visual acuity at this point. The final problem is people with albinism can have varying degrees of optic nerve hypoplasia and foveal hypoplasia. What that means is that the fovea, which is the point right on the back of the eye with the most dense area of rods and cones, is underdeveloped, so you have less rods and less cones. The rods interpret light and movement, and the cones interpret color and vibrance. Rods are good for low lighting, and cones are good for highlighting. And when you don't have as many of either, again, that can reduce the clarity or your visual acuity. Optic nerve hypoplasia means that your optic nerve has not fully developed. I have both of these things fairly severe, and it's difficult to know which is causing more of my visual loss than the other. Question number 4. Why don't you have pink eyes? Why do you have pink eyes? Or just general questions about eyes. People with albinism do not have red eyes. Full stop, period, end of sentence. The reason people with albinism have the reputation of having red eyes is because most people are used to seeing this and this. Rodents do have red eyes when they have albinism, but humans are not rodents. Humans will have varying colors of irises. Some people with albinism have irises that change slightly depend on the lighting or the colors they wear. Some people with albinism will have eyes that do look more or less red in a variety of lighting. And that's because you're seeing light reflect off the retina and come back out through the eyes. not because the person has red irises at all. There is a condition called aniridia, which some people with albinism may or may not have, which a person doesn't have an iris at all. And then they would probably look like they have more of a pinky grayish iris. But again, it's not going to be the same red as a rodent's iris with albinism. Question number 5. You look sick. Why don't you get out and tan more? Generally, why are you so white? Well, I can't tan, is the short answer. Most people with albinism are not able to tan at all, or certainly not to the same degree as your average person. I don't produce melanin. Melanin is the stuff that gives your skin color, so I am going to look whiter than sour cream. They don't make makeup in my shade because I am as pale can be. I'm not sick. I'm not ill. This is just how I look. Question number 6. Can you catch albinism? Or can you get albinism by being around somebody who is albino or procreating with someone who is albino? No. End of question. Because it is a genetic disorder, it is not contagious, it doesn't change who you are as a person, it only affects your eyes and possibly your hair and skin color. Question number 7. What part of the world are people with albinism from? Everywhere and anywhere. It doesn't matter whether you're Norwegian or Tanzanian, anyone can have albinism. Your parents can have the darkest of skin tones, and you can still be as white as I am. Question number 8. Are vitiligo and albinism the same? No, they are not. They're completely different disorders, but they do have some common features. Vitiligo is the gradual loss of pigment over one's lifetime, and it usually occurs in specific areas and not all at once. So somebody will gradually lose their pigment in one part of their body or on patches on their body, but not systemically. Albinism is the loss of pigment systemically throughout your body. You're born without pigment, you don't typically get pigment as you get older. Vitiligo, you are born with pigment and you gradually lose it over your lifetime. Question number 9. Does albinism make you stupid, cause intellectual disabilities, or is it scary? The answer is no to all of those questions. Unless you have something else going on, another genetic disorder, an accident that caused brain damage, you're not going to have an intellectual disability, and I don't think albinism is that scary. I'm not a ghost. I'm just an extremely pale person. Camera just died, so we are back. Question number 9. Does albinism give you superpowers, make you evil, or give someone else superpowers by hanging around with you? I hate to break it to you. I'm not Daredevil, and I'm not Batman. I am not a voodoo witch, and I can't cure HIV. There are a lot of people around the world who believe that people with albinism or animals with albinism have special magical powers. That's just not the case. We're the same as anyone else. Movies typically portray people with albinism to be evil, if you're thinking of Silas from Angels and Demons, or if you think of the twins in The Matrix, most portrayals of albinism in media are negative. So there still is a belief amongst a number of people that albino people are scary or unusual or evil, and that just isn't the case. We have the same capacity for good and evil as anyone else, and I like to say I'm on the side of the angels. Final question, and probably one of the most important ones: what does albinism have to do with witchcraft? In a number of countries in Africa, in particular Tanzania, people with albinism are seen to possess magical powers. If you are consuming the body parts of human albinos, it could cure HIV, and people with albinism there are in exceedingly high risk for being murdered. The going rate for a human being like myself is $75,000 US. It seems wrong that someone with a genetic disorder is seen to have these magical cures. It's also believed that people who procreate with a white person will get an albino child. Again, that's not true. And trying to bust these misconceptions is so important. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm sorry we ended on a down note, but I think it was so important to talk about. I hope you all have a wonderful day. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them down in the comments. If you want to see more of these types of videos, you know what to do with your bells and buttons down below. And I'll talk to you all next time. Bye for now.